He used to be the man who could make the sun feel warmer just by smiling at her. He was laughter and comfort and quiet strength all rolled into one, and she had fallen in love with every little thing about him, the way he hummed while making coffee, the way he held her hand when walking down the street, the way his eyes lit up when he talked about their future. Everything felt perfect, like a story written for them, and she had never imagined a day where that light could dim. But life has a way of shaking even the strongest foundations, and one day everything changed. It was sudden and unexpected: a phone call, a hospital visit, a crash that no one saw coming, and suddenly the man she knew was gone, replaced by someone quieter, someone who looked through her with eyes that once held love and warmth. The house felt empty even when he was there, and she could feel the space growing between them like a chasm she didn't know how to cross. She tried at first to talk to him, gentle questions and soft smiles, hoping for the spark to return, but he would nod politely, smile faintly, and retreat into silence, as if speaking would undo the barrier he had built. She watched him at the dinner table, his fork moving mechanically, his eyes staring at some distant thought, and her heart ached with every beat. She remembered their plans for the weekend, the movies they loved, the trips they had dreamed of, and it all felt like memories of someone else's life. She started leaving little notes on the bathroom mirror, small reminders of love, a simple "I love you" tucked under his coffee mug, a text with a picture of them laughing at a silly joke, and still the silence remained. The man she loved seemed trapped in a bubble of his own pain. A bubble she couldn't reach no matter how far she stretched. She cried alone at night, remembering the way he used to hold her close, the way he would tell her everything would be okay, and she refused to let go of the hope that he could come back. Friends and family offered advice, but nothing felt right. Nothing could explain the emptiness in his gaze. The wife walked through the days, carefully measuring her words, touching him lightly on the shoulder, as if even the gentlest touch might shatter the fragile shell he had built. She started remembering everything that had made him himself, the way he laughed at the rain, the way he always helped strangers in need, the way he whispered her name in the quiet of the night, and she realized she needed to fight, not with anger, but with love, to pull him back from the edge. One afternoon, she found a photo from their first vacation together, a picture of him laughing with the sun on his face, and a memory of his warmth hit her with a force she hadn't expected. She sat him down, holding the photo, and whispered everything she felt, everything she had tried to say in the past weeks, in the past months, in the past lonely nights. She told him she loved him, not the man he had become, but the man she knew was still inside somewhere, and something flickered in his eyes, a crack in the wall he had built around his heart. He didn't speak at first, just stared at the photograph, then looked at her, and for the first time in weeks, she saw something human again, something vulnerable, but alive. The walls didn't come down all at once, but a door had opened, and she stepped through it with him, gently coaxing him back into the light. He cried quietly, admitting fears he hadn't shared, fears he had carried alone, and she held him tighter than ever before, letting him know he didn't have to be alone anymore. Days turned into weeks, and slowly routines returned, laughter returned, small smiles returned, and though he wasn't exactly the man he had been, the love between them grew stronger, because they had survived the storm together. She made him tea in the morning, and he held her hand when they walked down the street, the light in his eyes returning piece by piece, and every night before sleep they whispered "I love you," promising again to fight together no matter what came next. The house was alive again, with memories being made, with hope being rebuilt, with love stronger than before. She realized that sometimes love wasn't about perfect moments, but about fighting through the hardest days, about holding on when it seems impossible, about reminding someone that they're seen and cherished even when they can't see themselves. And in that quiet strength, in that unshakable devotion, she found not just her husband again, but a deeper bond that would never fade. Even as life slowly returned to something resembling normal, the scars of that day lingered. She would catch him staring out the window, lost in thought, a shadow of the man she had known, and she felt the familiar ache in her chest, but she refused to let despair win. She began Small, she would play the songs they loved. On quiet afternoons, she would leave little reminders of their happiest memories tucked into his pockets or by his bedside. She learned to watch not just for what he said, but for what he didn't say, for the subtle signs of progress, the smallest flicker of light in his eyes. There were days when it felt hopeless, days when the silence was deafening and she questioned whether her love alone was enough, but she remembered the first time she had met him, the way he had made her feel safe in a world that often felt cold, and she knew that love was a force. Stronger than fear, stronger than pain, stronger than any wall he could build. She spoke to him softly during those moments, not pushing, not demanding, but simply reminding him of their life together, the laughter they had shared, the dreams they had yet to chase. One evening, she suggested a walk through the park where they had first fallen in love. The air was crisp, the leaves turning shades of gold and red, and she could see his hesitation in every step, but she reached for his hand, and he didn't pull away. He looked at her with eyes that were beginning to recognize her again, and she felt a small spark of hope ignite inside her heart. They walked slowly, talking about little things, the weather, the way the sunlight hit the water, the squirrels chasing each other across the grass, and each word was a thread weaving them closer together. At home, she cooked his favorite meal, and they ate together without silence. For the first time in months, they laughed quietly at a shared memory, and he reached across the table to touch her hand, and she held it for a long time, feeling the warmth of his skin and the return of something that had been lost, but never truly gone. She realized that healing wasn't instant, it wasn't dramatic, it was quiet and steady. It was choosing each day to love even when it was hard, and to hold on even when it felt impossible. Therapy sessions followed, gentle discussions led by a professional who guided them through the trauma he had experienced. She listened as he spoke about fears he had hidden, fears he had buried deep inside, and she never judged, never interrupted, never dismissed. She simply held space for him, and in return he began to trust again. He admitted that he had been afraid of burdening her, of losing her love, and she reassured him that no fear could ever break what they had built together. Weeks turned into months, and they began to reclaim life in small, meaningful ways. They revisited old haunts, walked through familiar streets, held hands like they used to, and slowly but surely the laughter returned. It was quieter at first, a shy, almost hesitant sound, but it grew bolder with every passing day. They danced in the living room to old records. They shared coffee on Sunday mornings, watching the world wake up together. And with each small gesture, the man she loved returned, not exactly as he had been, but as someone deeper, someone more aware of love's fragility and strength. She remembered the night he finally spoke, about the day that changed everything, the fear that had gripped him and the hopelessness he had felt, and she listened quietly, letting him speak without interruption. She held him close as he cried, admitting he had felt lost. She kissed his hair and whispered that she had never stopped loving him, that no storm could ever erase what they had together. In that moment, the distance that had seemed insurmountable vanished, and for the first time in months, he truly felt home again. The journey wasn't easy. There were still days of quiet sadness, days when memories of the trauma would creep back, but they faced them together. They learned new ways to communicate, to hold space, to forgive themselves and each other. They discovered that love isn't always about grand gestures. It's about the quiet consistency of showing up for one another, about being patient, about understanding, and about never giving up on the person you chose to spend your life with. One morning, as they watched the sunrise together on the porch, he squeezed her hand and smiled, a genuine smile, the kind that had first made her heart race. She leaned her head on his shoulder, feeling the warmth of the sun on her face and the warmth of his love in her life. She whispered, "I love you," and he whispered it back, and in that simple exchange, years of pain and distance melted away, leaving only the truth that they were stronger together than apart, that love could heal what fear had broken. and that no matter what the future held, they would face it side by side. Time moved slowly, but steadily, and with each passing day, they found new ways to reconnect. She learned to read the subtle shifts in his expressions, the small tells of his moods, the flicker of old joy hidden behind moments of sadness. She began leaving little notes again, not as reminders, but as celebrations of the moments they shared. A sticky note on the fridge saying, "I love your laugh," a folded piece of paper in his wallet with a memory from their first date, and slowly these small gestures reminded him that he was not alone. They revisited the places that had once brought them joy: the park bench by the lake, the coffee shop where they had spent countless mornings laughing over small pastries, and the streets of the town where their love had first blossomed. Each visit felt like reclaiming pieces of their life that had been lost to fear and trauma, and each time he smiled a little wider, laughed a little louder, she felt her heart swelling with hope. There were setbacks as well, days when the silence returned and the weight of the past threatened to pull them back into despair. She didn't panic. She simply held his hand, sat beside him, and waited for the walls to come down again. She knew that love wasn't about rushing or forcing change. It was about patience, understanding, and steadfast presence. It was about being willing to sit in the quiet, holding on to hope even when the world seemed cold and unfeeling. Friends began to notice the change too. They commented on the way he looked at her again, the way they laughed together, the subtle gestures of love that spoke louder than words. He began to open up to them as well, sharing stories of his fears, admitting moments of doubt, and through this he discovered that vulnerability was not weakness, it was strength, and that trusting again was part of the healing. One evening, he surprised her with a small bouquet of wildflowers, the kind they used to pick together when they first met. He had been nervous choosing them, unsure if he was ready to show this new openness, but she took them with tears in her eyes, feeling the depth of his effort and the sincerity of his love. They laughed together over the simplicity of it, and she realized that love didn't need to be extravagant to be powerful. It simply needed presence and authenticity. They continued to build their life carefully, brick by brick, creating new routines while honoring the old ones. They cooked meals together, shared long walks, held each other close in the quiet moments before sleep, and each time they did it felt like a stitch mending the fabric of their love. It was imperfect and sometimes messy, but it was theirs, and it was real, and that was enough. Slowly, he began to express himself more openly, sharing fears, hopes, dreams, and frustrations. He allowed himself to be seen fully, not just as the man before the trauma, but as the man he had become because of it, and she embraced every part of him without hesitation. They talked about the future, planning trips, long dreamed of hobbies. They wanted to try children's laughter, perhaps grandchildren in the distance. And each conversation was a reaffirmation that they were in this together for life. One rainy afternoon, they sat by the window, wrapped in a blanket, sipping tea. She watched the raindrops race down the glass, feeling the comfort of his presence. Beside her, he reached for her hand. She rested her head on his shoulder, and in the quiet of that moment, they didn't need words. They had weathered storms together, faced fears together, and emerged stronger. Their love was no longer naive. It was mature, resilient, unwavering, and they both understood that this was what it meant to truly fight for someone and to truly hold on. The days grew longer and the seasons slowly shifted around them, but inside the house there was a new rhythm, a steady heartbeat of shared life and rediscovered love. She noticed how he lingered a little longer in the doorway when she entered, a smile that hadn't been there for months, and the gentle way he brushed her hair from her face. She realized that healing was not linear, and that every small step forward was a victory worth celebrating. One night, he finally spoke about the night that had changed everything. He hadn't wanted to burden her with his thoughts, his fears, the way he felt, as if the world had been ripped from beneath his feet. She listened with quiet intensity, letting him spill out every emotion, every tear, every trembling word. Without interrupting, she held his hand, pressed a kiss to his temple, and whispered that she had never stopped loving him, that no matter how distant he had seemed, she had always been there waiting for him. It was the first time in months that he let himself be fully vulnerable, and in that moment the air between them shifted. The house that had felt empty for so long now hummed with a new energy, a connection that was stronger because it had been tested. They talked for hours until exhaustion pulled them into each other's arms, the kind of embrace that mends invisible wounds, the kind that speaks louder than words, and in the warmth of that embrace they both understood that love was not a given but a choice made every day with courage, patience, and commitment. The following weeks were filled with quiet victories. They laughed over breakfast the way they used to, shared inside jokes the way only they could, understood one another without speaking, and held each other when memories of the trauma threatened to rise again. They planned small adventures, a hike in the hills, a picnic by the lake, a drive with the windows down and music blaring, each trip a reclamation of joy, a reminder that life could be beautiful even after pain. He began to open up more to friends and family, sharing little bits of himself, the jokes he remembered, the memories that made him smile, the fears that he had once kept locked away, and she watched him with pride and love, feeling the man she had always known emerge in new and deeper ways. They began to dream again together, not ignoring the past, but using it as a foundation to build a future stronger than before. One Sunday morning, they decided to visit the park where they had shared their first kiss. It had been years since they had been there together, and the memories came rushing back. He took her hand and looked into her eyes, the same eyes he had fallen in love with all those years ago, and whispered, "I am here now, I am yours again." And she smiled, feeling tears prick the corners of her eyes. The sun filtered through the trees, casting golden light around them, and in that moment the world felt right again. They sat on the bench, reminiscing, laughing, crying, and holding each other close. She realized that the man she loved had always been inside him. She had just needed to help him find his way back. He squeezed her hand, whispered, "Thank you for never giving up," and she knew that their bond had been forged not just through love, but through unwavering faith and resilience. The storms they had faced had carved deeper roots into their hearts, and they were unshakable. Evenings were quiet and tender. They cooked dinner together, held each other on the couch, watched old movies, and occasionally spoke of the pain, but only to acknowledge it and release it. They found peace in routine, in shared presence, in knowing that no matter what came next they would face it together. The house was no longer a space of loss, but a home of healing and growth, and every glance, every touch, every word was a testament to the journey they had survived side by side. He surprised her one evening with a small note tucked into her book, a simple "I love you" that made her heart soar. She realized that the love they now shared was different. It was not just passion, it was patience, it was understanding, it was the quiet commitment to show up every day for each other. It was proof that love could survive the unthinkable, that hearts could heal, and that sometimes the greatest victories in life were the ones fought quietly in the heart. Spring arrived, slowly bringing with it longer days and soft sunlight that seemed to kiss every surface of their home. He and she had grown together in ways that neither could have imagined, through laughter, through tears, through quiet moments that stitched them closer than ever before. One morning, he took her hand and led her outside the house where the garden bloomed with flowers they had planted years ago. The roses were in full bloom, the petals soft and fragrant, and he looked at her with eyes that held both apology and gratitude. He whispered, "I know I hurt you, I know I withdrew, but I promise you I am here, I am yours again." And she felt tears slide down her cheeks. She pressed her hand against his heart, feeling it beat steady and strong, and whispered, "I never stopped loving you, never, even when it felt impossible." And in that embrace, the last of the walls crumbled. The distance that had once seemed unbridgeable vanished, replaced by a quiet certainty that they had found each other again. They spent the day walking through the neighborhood, hand in hand, greeting familiar faces, sharing laughter and small talk. The streets that had once felt ordinary now seemed full of color and life, each moment a reminder that they had survived together, that love had endured the storms, and that they were stronger for it. He pulled her close as they paused under a large oak tree, the same one they had carved their initials into decades ago, and traced the letters gently with his finger, a symbol of enduring love. That night they returned home and sat on the porch wrapped in a blanket sipping tea as the sun set, casting golden light across the sky. She rested her head on his shoulder, feeling the warmth of his presence and the depth of his commitment. He kissed her hair, whispered, "I will always fight for us," and she held him tighter, knowing that they had not only reclaimed their love, but had transformed it into richer, something more resilient. The following weeks were filled with quiet celebrations of life and love. They revisited old haunts and discovered new ones, cooked meals together, laughed at small mishaps, and held each other through moments of lingering fear or sadness. Each time they looked into each other's eyes, they saw not only the person they had loved, but the person they had helped rebuild. Each day their hearts growing stronger and more connected. One evening, he surprised her with a small box, a ring she had admired years ago, but never thought would come. She looked at him, stunned, her hands trembling as he took a knee and whispered, "I want to spend every day making up for the days I was lost. I want to be the man you fell in love with, and so much more. Will you continue this journey with me?" And she nodded through tears of joy, her heart overflowing. "I will." And in that single word, the past pain, the distance, the fear, all melted away, leaving only the promise of a future built together. They embraced beneath the soft glow of the porch light, the world quiet around them, the night holding them close, and for the first time in what felt like forever, there was nothing between them, only love, only trust, only the unwavering certainty that they were home in each other's arms. They whispered words of gratitude, forgiveness, hope, and dreams, knowing that this was what it meant to truly fight for love, to never give up, and to hold on even when it seemed impossible. Years later, they would remember this time not as a period of despair, but as the season that had forged their love into something unbreakable. They would tell their story to friends, family, anyone who needed to hear that love can heal, that hearts can mend, that even when the world seems dark, there is light waiting for those who choose to fight for it. They had survived the unimaginable and emerged not just together, but stronger, wiser, more deeply connected than ever before. And every morning when the sun rose, they would sit together on the porch, sipping coffee, holding hands, watching the world awaken, and smile at the simple truth that they had chosen each other every single day, that they had never given up, and that the man she had once feared, lost forever, had returned stronger, more loving, more present than she had ever imagined. He was hers, and she was his, and together they had created a love that would endure all storms.